In this movie, I'll show you how to apply special fill and stroke attributes from the appearance panel to live editable text. And although it works really well, as we're seeing here on screen, the approach is far from intuitive, even by Illustrator standards. So I'm going to start things off in the usual way by going up to the File menu and choosing New from Template. And then I'll go ahead and double-click on my RGB with Center Guides document in order to create this new file. And now I'll just go ahead and zoom out a little bit so that we can see the bleed. And I want to draw a rectangle as a backdrop that snaps to that bleed. And so I'll go up to the View menu and make sure that my Smart Guides are turned on. In my case, they aren't. So I'll choose the command, or you can press Control-U or Command-U on the Mac. And I will be taking advantage of that shortcut because Smart Guides have kind of a strange effect on type. Next, I'll select the rectangle tool, which of course you can get by pressing the M key, and I'll drag from one corner of that red bleed boundary to the other. And now I'll go up to the control panel, click on the second swatch, and change it to none, and that gets rid of the stroke. And then I'll click on this first swatch and change it to this dark shade of purple in order to adjust the fill. And now I'll press the V key to switch back to the black arrow tool, and I'll click off the rectangle to deselect it, and then I'll zoom back in. All right, I don't need these guides, so I'll just go ahead and turn off the guides layer here inside the layers panel. And next, I'll select my type tool, which you can get by pressing the T key. Now I want to set up some formatting attributes in advance. So I'll click on the word character up here in the control panel. I'll make sure that the default font, Myriad Pro, is selected. And then I'll set the type size to 336 points. And I'll press the Tab key to advance to the leading value, and I'll change it to 306 points. Next, you want to change this kerning value right here from auto to optical, and then I'll click on the all caps icon. All right, now I want to center the text, and I'll do that by clicking on this Align Center icon up here in the control panel. And I also want my text to appear white, so I'll change this fill swatch to white like so. And then I'll just go ahead and click somewhere in my document window. Now, if you're working along with me, you'll probably see some lorem ipsum placeholder type, very large on screen, which is a new feature inside the software. And the good thing about it, if nothing else, is that at least it lets you know that you have indeed created a new text object. Now I'll just go ahead and replace those letters by typing in from the keyboard, deep type like so, with the two words separated by a carriage return. And then I'll press the Escape key in order to accept that change. Now, for some reason, every formatting attribute except the color took. And so I'll just go ahead and click on that first color swatch up here in the control panel once again and change it for once and for all to white. Now let's say I want to apply a very thick stroke to my text. I'll go ahead and change the stroke color to black for starters. And then I'll select this line weight value and I'll crank it up to, let's say, 50 points. And I end up turning my letters entirely black. And that's because the stroke is in front of the fill and it's centered around the characters as well. Let's say I want to move the stroke in back of the fill, then I'd bring up the Appearance panel, which you can get by choosing the Appearance command from the Fill menu, at which point I'm not even seeing the fill and stroke attributes. Now notice right here that we're seeing the word type. That tells us that the type object is selected. If we want to select the characters instead, then you just go ahead and double click on the word characters, and that will switch you back to the type tool, as we're seeing right here. It goes ahead and selects all of those characters, and it reveals the fill and stroke attributes. And so you might imagine that moving the stroke in back of the fill is a simple matter of dragging it and dropping it below the fill like so. But notice as soon as I drop, Illustrator just flat out ignores me. And it doesn't matter how many times you drag and drop that stroke or whether you drag the fill above the stroke instead, it's just not going to happen. What you need to do is apply the fill and stroke attributes to the entire text object as opposed to the individual characters. And the best way to pull that off is to press the Escape key in order to switch back to the type object. Notice now that we're no longer seeing the fill and stroke attributes here inside the Appearance panel. Then, for the most flexible results, get rid of the fill and stroke entirely by going up here to the control panel, clicking on the first swatch, changing it to none, and then clicking on the second swatch and setting it to none as well, at which point your text will be entirely invisible. That's not a problem. Now what you want to do is make sure that the type is selected here inside the Appearance panel, And then let's add our fill and stroke attributes by clicking on either of these two icons down here in the bottom left corner of the panel. I'll just go ahead and click on Add New Fill, and I'll change it from this weak black that we're seeing currently on screen by clicking on the fill swatch and changing it to white like so. And then I'll go ahead and change the stroke once again to black, and I'll go ahead and crank it up to 50 points, let's say, and press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac, at which point we get the same results we had before, but now you can grab that stroke and drag it and drop it below the fill, and it actually works. All right, now if you take a look at the final result right here, you'll notice that all the characters are rounded, and there it is. That's what happens when you have smart guides on when you hover your cursor over an editable text object. So notice when the cursor is away, we see the characters as they actually appear, but when you hover over, you see a preview of the base type objects in the color assigned to the layer. I don't really like that kind of flickering, especially in video, so I'll go ahead and turn off the smart guides by pressing Control-U or Command-U on the Mac. And now we can see more cleanly that we have rounded characters of type and that this black edge here is nudged down and to the right. To make that happen, I'll go ahead and switch back to my illustration in progress, and I'll click on the word stroke right here, and I'll change my corner setting to round join, which goes ahead and rounds off those characters. I really want to round off the white characters as well, so I'll make a new stroke by dropping down to this Add New Stroke icon and clicking on it, or you can just press that keyboard shortcut of Control-Alt/, or Command-Option/, on the Mac, and I'll go ahead and change this stroke right here, the top one, to white this time around. Notice that it still has those round corners, and I'll change that line weight value right there to 30 points, and that delivers the round characters of type. So in other words, we're changing Myriad Pro regular into a special extra bold rounded style. All right, that ends up packing the characters together way too tightly. So I'll click on the word character up here in the control panel, and I'll change this tracking value to 100 and press the Enter key or the Return key on the Mac. Now let's offset that black stroke by selecting it here inside the Appearance panel, and then I'll click on the FX icon down here at the bottom of the panel, choose Distort and Transform, and choose the Transform command. And then, so I can see what I'm doing, I'll turn on the Preview checkbox, and I'll change both the horizontal and vertical move values to 5 points as well, which is going to nudge that stroke down and to the right, after which point I'll click OK. All right, now I want to center my type inside the artboard, and so I'll click on the word Align up here, and then change the Align To setting to Align to Artboard, and then I'll click on each of the center icons, Horizontal Align Center, and then Vertical Align Center. That scoots the type a little bit too high, so I'll press Shift down arrow a couple of times to nudge those letters down. And now I'll twirl open this black stroke right here so that you can see our transform effect. I want to add a drop shadow as well, so I'll make sure that stroke is selected. Then I'll click on the FX icon, choose Stylize, and choose Drop Shadow. The default settings work just fine, and if you want to see how fine they work, then just go ahead and turn on the Preview checkbox and click OK, and then I'll deselect my type by pressing Control-Shift-A or Command-Shift-A on the Mac. And so the moral of the story is, the next time you want to apply specialty fill and stroke attributes to live editable type, do so not from the control panel, but rather from the Appearance panel instead.